Excellent. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the November Applied AI Meetup. My name is Justin Grammons. I am one of the co-founders of the group, along with Eric, Jen, and Daniel Feldman. So tonight, we're super excited. We have Danika Hannon coming to speak with us. She's a longtime data scientist at MoneyGram International, and she's going to be sharing a little bit about what she's doing today with Boltz.ai. Before I get into that, wanted to mention a couple things. If you may or may not know, we have a podcast that we're doing right now. It's called it's the Conversations on Applied AI is the name of the podcast. So it's on iTunes, it's on Google. Any place you can find your podcast, you can find it. You can also find it at podcast.appliedai.mn. And I'll go ahead and put that in the notes here along the way. Really excited to continue to talk with more and more interesting people. In fact, Danika is going to be coming up probably on a future episode as well. So super excited to talk with her. But we've been talking. I think we're on maybe 10 or 11 or so, and would love to have people listen to it, learn from it. If you want to be on it, reach out, contact me. It's just a great way to sort of talk about what's going on around artificial intelligence and how we are applying it in today's world. The other thing I wanted to mention too is if this is your first meetup, welcome. We're super excited to have you here. And we meet the first Thursday of every month. So if you go to appliedai.mn, you'll get a list of all the events that we have coming up. And our next one is on December 3rd. And we're going to be talking about building artificial intelligence models for sound recognition with less annotation effort. So we have a data scientist. He's a member of the AI lab actually at 3M. His name's Bongjung Kim, and he's going to be, he's completing his PhD in computer science at Northwestern University, and has been doing some really, really cool stuff using AI and audio. So hopefully you can make that. It'll be at the same time, 6:30 on December 3rd, the first Thursday of the month. So those are just a couple of things to talk about with regards to coming up. If you have questions along the way tonight, please go ahead and use the chat. Eric and I will be monitoring that. Obviously, we have it pretty open here, so please be sure to mute yourself. We don't want to have any sort of like background noise going on, but if you do have a question at the end, we'll probably just allow people to unmute themselves and we can have some conversation basically around all the exciting things. So Danika, so welcome. As I mentioned, you're working for a company, Boltz.ai. You're going to be talking a little bit about, what the company does and using quantum computing to help farmers optimize their resource use so they can lower their operating costs. And you also love to have you share a little bit about what you're doing with the Minnesota Quantum Computing Meetup and also the Women in Quantum Advisory Board. I don't know a whole lot about quantum computing, and I'd probably speak for a lot of people that are on the meeting. We're really excited to hear about it. I mean, I heard one little stat that when I was kind of researching quantum computers, that there was this arithmetic task that a quantum computer did in 200 seconds. And even the fastest supercomputer today by IBM, they said it would take 2.5 days to do that. And any other general supercomputer would probably have taken thousands of years. So it's pretty cool to be able to hear about what these quantum computers can do, and obviously the way that you're applying it with the startup you're at today. So with all of that, I will hand the floor over to you, and hopefully you can share your screen and be able to do whatever you need to do to get us started.
Absolutely. So can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Perfect. It's always good to make sure you can see the screen before you launch something, because I've done that before. All right. So first of all, Justin, Eric, thank you so much for the kind introduction. And I'd also like to give a shout out to Jen. They're the leaders of AppliedAI. And as I mentioned, AppliedAI is a fantastic meetup group. Here in the Twin Cities, we have a really wonderful meetup community, and all of us have pivoted online for COVID. And I've been so grateful to see that we can continue to have these meetups, that we're still reaching out and networking with each other. So for everyone who made the time to be here tonight and to support the meetup community, thank you. It really means a lot to everyone involved, and we're proud that we can continue being here for you all. So as Justin mentioned, my name is Danika Hannon. I have a couple of roles. So the primary one that I'm here to talk to you tonight about is my role with Boltz.ai as their head of operations. And I'm so excited to talk to you about Boltz and the work that we're doing. But before we really launch into that, there's another group that I'd love to talk to you a bit about, and that's Women in Quantum. Women in Quantum is an international organization, and what we're doing is we're really focused on championing the work that women are doing in the quantum computing space. And we're trying to make sure that no matter if a woman is going into academia or industry, she has the support and the resources that she needs to be really successful. And we're helping women with everything from strategizing their career moves to facing things like imposter syndrome and learning how to become really thoughtful and intentional about growing their careers. So if you are someone who's interested in joining Women in Quantum because maybe you'd like to have more mentorship, you're interested in networking opportunities, I did include a link where you can go to our site at onequantum.org/women. You can learn more about the work we're doing. You have the opportunity to join. And another really great benefit of this organization is that we hold summits. So our very first summit was in July, and it ran across 3 days. All of our summits are free because we're incredibly fortunate to have sponsorship from big companies who really believe in the work that we're doing. So in July, our sponsor was Honeywell. We do have another summit coming up in December. We haven't announced the dates yet, but I'm very excited to share that that's getting planned, and we are inviting speakers now. And one of the things that's especially cool about Women in Quantum is that with our global focus, you'll notice that of the 2 or 3 days that we have for the summit, we'll start the first day or two in a Central Standard Time zone that's pretty friendly for people in North America, but then we'll shift it so that we can catch audiences in Europe, Asia, or Africa, depending on where people are at. And we'll also make sure that we bring in speakers from those different continents. So that can be a nice thing because it really opens up networking. You're able to network with people on a global scale, and especially with COVID, where we're all stuck at home, it's nice to be able to reach out and connect with people like we couldn't before. And on the side panel, there's a bit of information about our leadership. So Denise Riffner is our president. She works for IonQ. Before that, she worked for Cambridge Quantum Computing. And before that, she was at IBM, leading up their quantum computing efforts. So Denise is a fantastic leader. And if you're at that networking event, there's a very good chance that you'll run into her and you'll get to connect with her personally. So if you're someone who likes to get to know other people, really learn about interesting stories and learn how you can get your career ahead, then Women in Quantum is a really good group to look into. So with that, we'll get to turn the attention to Boltz.ai. With Boltz.ai, we help farmers look at a bunch of different data streams so that they can really make the best decisions for their farms, so that they can take advantage of precision agriculture and quantum computing. And we'll go into more detail of both precision ag and quantum computing as we go. So this is a slide about our team, and I am remarkably proud of our team. We're led by Kwong. He's our CEO. Kwong has a PhD in astrophysics, and when he got done studying astrophysics, he decided that he wanted to move into data science and quantum computing. So he went on to become an IBM Q ambassador, and then he became an industry agricultural consultant. Kevin is our head of sciences. Like Kwong, Kevin got his PhD in astrophysics, and then he decided that he wanted to move into data science too, but he moved into a bit more of a niche area, and he's become an expert in time series models related to climate change. So if you have any interest in climate change, Kevin's a great person to connect to. He can tell you some really interesting things about that. And then I'm our head of operations. My background is originally in global agriculture. So I went to the Iowa State University and their College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, and I studied agriculture on a really global scale. And to get an understanding of how, if you're looking at a farm, what are all the things that go into making it successful? Imagine you have a farm in a rural area of a developing country, and maybe that farmer has fantastic yields. They're doing a great job growing their crop. Everything is going really well on the production side, but they don't have the infrastructure to get themselves to market. Or maybe they have slightly lower yields because they're having a lot of problems with weather and they just don't get the rain that they need to be able to grow an abundant crop. So for Global Resource Systems, it was looking at things very holistically and understanding how if you change one part of the system, what happens to everything else? Because our world is incredibly interconnected, and with agriculture, it's especially so. So in the last few years, I did move out of agriculture and I got really interested in quantum computing and AI. And Kwong and I were introduced to each other through Denise. So she's a mutual connection. And we realized that we had very complementary skills. So I was brought on board to help our team with our business side. And then we're extremely fortunate to have very strong technical team members who are supporting us. And there's a couple of them who are specializing in quantum computing. There's one who is a quantum research scientist, who's a PhD candidate, that's Nam. Hua is our optimization research scientist, and optimization is one of the leading topics for quantum computing right now. So it's fantastic to have her on board. And then we have Long, who is a former Bush consultant and an engineer. And collectively, our team has founded and worked for more than 10 startups, and we've published over 150 research papers, including 2 in the Nature journal. So we have very deep technical expertise. Another thing that I'm really proud of with our team that is actually kind of unusual for ag startups is that on the leadership side, all 3 of us have background in agriculture. So we're able to understand this industry a bit more deeply because we've all been a part of it. So for Quang, he is from Vietnam originally, and when he was there, he grew up on a coffee farm. And now that he has left Vietnam, he lives in Canada, he went on to focus on providing really high-tech solutions in the ag space. For Kevin, he grew up in Canada, and his grandparents owned and operated an orchard. So as a kid, he spent a lot of time on the orchard and got great exposure to ag. As an adult, he went on to work on AI that forecasts the impacts of climate change. So you can see those roots running through our story. And then for me, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a graduate of Iowa State University's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. While I was in school, and then for a little while afterwards, I had the privilege of working for food and ag companies, both internationally and domestically. So this is a picture that I really like on the right-hand side. This is from when I was 18, and I went on my very first internship, and that was to India. So I was with a group that day where all of these women were involved in agriculture. So we were having a group talking session to get a better understanding of what were some of the challenges that we're facing and what could we do to help them. Now at Boltz.ai, we're extremely fortunate to have a lot of mentorship. And before I joined the call, I was looking at the list of attendees, and I noticed that it looked like some of our mentors are going to be joining the call tonight. So you know who you are, and if you're on the call, we sincerely appreciate you. So the guidance that we have is from personnel at a really broad range of groups. It's from corporations, nonprofits, governments, and academia. So in the corporation side, we have mentors at both IonQ and Cambridge Quantum Computing. Both of those are startups in the quantum computing space that are doing very interesting work. So right now, the quantum computing community is still pretty tight-knit, even though there are some cases where we're in competition with each other. Everyone is very supportive of each other, and we're extremely fortunate to have mentors at both of those companies. Then for the nonprofit side, we're connected to a nonprofit in both Canada and the US they're each doing things that are really helpful. And in Canada, Venture Lab is an accelerator that's helping us. So if you happen to know anyone who's in Canada that's working on a startup, I know that might be a long shot, but Canada's not that far from here. If you happen to know anyone in Canada who's looking for a startup accelerator, I would really recommend that they take a look at Venture Lab. They have a fantastic team there, and they've been giving us incredibly beneficial coaching. Then here in Minnesota, we have Red Wing Ignite. So Red Wing Ignite is based in southern Minnesota. They're about an hour and a half drive away from the Twin Cities, but it's really worth it to make the trek down there because they have so much knowledge and expertise, and they are very much about making sure that the startup community in Minnesota thrives. And what's pretty neat is that they've been doing a lot of work lately with Launch Minnesota, and Launch Minnesota is a state level effort to help make sure that our startup industry succeeds. So if you are interested in launching your own startup, if this is the space that you want to get into, please feel free to let me know. And I'd be more than happy to make a warm introduction for you with the team at Red Wing Ignite. Then on the government side with SCORE, that's another good startup resource for anyone on the call who is in the startup space. SCORE is made up of a network of volunteers. They're people who have either launched their own business, or they're people who are very successful in their current careers, and they're at a point where they want to give back. SCORE is funded by the US government's Small Business Administration, and it's all about connecting people to expertise to help them succeed. So they're really focused on the business side, which can be a great boost. And the academia front, we're going through a boot camp through the University of Toronto's Creative Destruction Lab, and we've been able to connect with mentors and guidance there. And then we have connections to Iowa State University. Because that's my alma mater, I was extremely fortunate to connect with a lot of great professors there. And now that we're getting things up and running with Boltz.ai, I'm reaching back out to those mentors to reconnect with them. And on the quantum community, quantum computing community front, we're also very connected, which is such a privilege. And we're connected at the local, national, and international level. So locally, I saw we have some Minnesota quantum computing meetup members on the call tonight. Shout out to David Radcliffe. He let me join the leadership team for the Minnesota quantum computing meetup a couple of years ago, and it's just been such a great experience. At the Minnesota Quantum Computing Meetup, we are all about championing the work that's being done in Minnesota for quantum computing. So I'm not sure how many of you are aware of this, but Optum is a research and medical company, and they're already starting to make strides into the quantum computing space. So we're helping grow the talent here in Minnesota because we know that quantum computing will have a big impact one day, and we want to be ready for that. And more importantly, we want to help you be ready for that. At the national level, I'm a member of the Quantum Economic Development Consortium, and for the US, the QEDC is very focused on making sure that the US can be really competitive in quantum computing. So they're doing everything that they can to bring people together, build out that quantum computing network and capability, and make sure that we're competitive on an international scale. On the Canadian side, we're connecting to a couple of superclusters. So superclusters are really interesting. I hadn't heard of them until I was talking to someone from Canada. And what superclusters are is they're groups where they bring together like-minded people and companies so that they can network and build connections with each other. And these two superclusters, both Scale AI and Quantum Industry Canada, are focused on the quantum computing space. So we're working on getting our applications in to join them, and we're really looking forward to being a part of those communities. Then on the international level, I'm a senior advisor on the Women in Quantum Advisory Board. So we have connections at all levels, and we're really fortunate to be plugged into this community. Now, Boltz.ai, right now, we're really focused on the ag industry. So because that's where we're looking at, I thought it'd be good to tell you more about the industry and tell you about some of the things that we're seeing there and why quantum computing is a fit for that. So if you look at the global conditions, there's kind of something that's really interesting going on. So we did some research, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has cited 3 key things that they're seeing happening on a global scale for agriculture. The first one is feeding a growing population. The second one is focusing on profitability for farmers. And then the third one is sustainability. So each of these is a pretty big deal on its own, and we'll walk through those now. So for the challenges and opportunities with population growth, there's a bit of a mismatch between where our population is expected to grow and the countries that have really heavy agricultural output. So you can see here, Africa is a continent where the population is expected to go up by quite a bit. Asia is another big continent for that. And then if we look at this map on the right, it has our global agricultural output. We can see that the countries that are shaded as dark have higher output than the countries that are shaded as brown. So brown is lowest output, the dark green is the highest agricultural output. And we can see that there's this problem where we expect to see some of the biggest population rises, the agriculture may not be able to keep up with that demand. So from a quantum computing side, I think that there's actually a lot of opportunity there because quantum computing was built to solve exceptionally hard problems. And we're going to go more into quantum computing in a minute, but quantum computing was built for very complex problems that other computers might have trouble handling. So like Justin was saying, they can handle hard problems faster than a lot of our other computers can, and they can analyze more data than other computers can. So where this ties in to population growth and agricultural productivity is that if we can't produce food for people where they're at, that means that we have to get the food to them. So we have to be able to find ways to move massive amounts of food across borders. And we have to make sure that when it gets to people, it's safe. So especially if you're moving protein products, you have to be really mindful of temperatures. So we have to make sure that it's food safe, that it's edible when it gets to them. We have to make sure that it's quality food, that it has not only caloric needs getting met, but also nutritional needs getting met. And we need to make sure that it's food that people like and that they actually want to eat. So I remember years ago, my sister was doing this study where she was reading up on golden rice. And golden rice was an experiment that had been done at one point where researchers were able to modify rice so that it could have a lot more nutrients in it. But the problem was that it turned golden instead of being the classic white color. And there's something really interesting that happened there. People didn't want to eat the rice because it was golden and they didn't like it, so it never really took off. So as we look at growing population and as we look at our agricultural productivity, I think that quantum computing is really poised in a great position to help us with these challenges, because we have to think about the supply chain and logistics. We have to think about consumer preferences. We have to think about food safety and health. On its own, each of those issues are complex. And when you combine them together, that's when it gets exciting and that's when it gets really fun. And if you're someone who likes to think about quantum computing, your wheels can just start spinning. You could go all day thinking about the opportunities there. So with food production is something that can be incredibly costly and resource intensive. So a lot of us who are here in either the US or for the team members who have called in from Canada, I think that it can get really easy to forget just how difficult it is to produce food and just how costly it is. Because when we go to the store, it typically is really abundant. So except for COVID, we had a lot of empty shelves. That was very outside of the norm. But for a lot of us, food is easy to get. There's a lot of variety of it. And we don't have to think all that much about all the time, labor, and resources that went into producing that. So we've been doing a lot of customer discovery calls for Boltz.ai. And this week we had one that was very interesting because they brought up a great point. We were on this customer discovery call. We were told that in their lifetime, our farmer may only get 30 chances to make money. So if you think about it, you have a farmer who is somewhere in the Minnesota area, we'll say southern Minnesota because it's a great growing region, and they're growing corn or soybeans. So in that whole calendar year, whereas the rest of us probably have about 24, 26 pay periods in a year, the farmers are growing a single product that they have to start growing in the spring, keep alive and keep in great condition all the way until fall when it's time to harvest. And then they're able to get the payoff from it. So for farmers, it's a lot more high risk, where there's a lot of stuff that's out of their control. And it's a lot riskier than it is for most other industries because their growing cycles are so much different and their production cycles are just so much different from, well, a lot of other things. Then when I was in the food and agriculture industry, I spent about 6 months or so in supply chain. And in supply chain, we had a joke. And the joke was, when is a penny not a penny? Well, it turns out that a penny isn't a penny when you're buying thousands of pounds worth of product a day. So I remember a typical day, I would be buying 80,000 pounds of beef to go send for Chipotle, because I used to work for a company that did a lot of food manufacturing for Chipotle. And that was just me. I wasn't the main buyer. I was one on a team of 4 or 5, and that was just at corporate. So we had this team of 4 or 5 people, and then we had plants all over the US who are also making their own buying and purchasing decisions. So if you can think about people who they're all buying collectively hundreds of thousands of pounds of product a day, and that might just be in one product segment, that might just be beef, let alone the pork or chicken or soybeans or corn. So if you're looking at things on a really big scale, a penny is not a penny if you can save a penny on an order, or if you have to pay a penny more, because over time, that's really going to add up at the end of the year and that's going to cut into your bottom line. So farmers have to be really savvy about their financials. And I think that this is another area where quantum computing and AI have a great tie-in, because quantum computing is built to optimize things, and it's built to look at, we have all these complex decisions that we could make, but which one will get us the best outcome? So this is another area where food production is so costly and resource intensive, but I sincerely feel that quantum computing could be a great fit to help us solve these challenges. And the third thing is sustainability. So we all know that sustainability is incredibly important as we're facing things like climate change, increasing population, all these different factors that are making things tougher. We have to pay more attention to sustainability, and we need to do it in some really meaningful ways. So for the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN, we know that climate change is number 13. And with climate change, that ties into a lot of resource use and how can we make things smarter? How can we make better decisions? And with Boltz, one of the things that we can help farmers do is we can help them use less resources so that their operations can become more environmentally friendly and more sustainable. So now we'll go into quantum computing and precision ag. Those are two of the big drivers of Boltz.ai. So in the quantum computing space, just in case you're not familiar with it, quantum computing is really built for complexity. And it's a fascinating area. And right now, optimization problems are a key focus. So we've seen some really neat problems come about, like Volkswagen has been doing work with a quantum computing company to optimize their busing routes. And when they did that, they've been saving like thousands of gallons of fuel. They've been saving on carbon emissions. There's also some interesting things that we could do with weather prediction. So quantum computing is built to take these incredibly massive problems and help solve them. And there's a lot of computers right now that can't handle those kinds of problems. So another thing that's that's very exciting about quantum computing is that it's opening up industries. So I'm having a little bit of trouble reading this quote because it's blocked, but there's a quote from Morgan Stanley on the right-hand screen that talks about how there's some real thought that quantum computing is going to create new industries that we can't even imagine yet. And I know that there is a lot of hype around quantum computing, so I need to throw that out there. There's a lot of hype with quantum computing, and there's a lot of people who are concerned that it's maybe being overblown. And I get that, but I also think that there is so much potential for it. And not only is there potential, we're starting to see these early use cases come out of where we're already getting value from it. And quantum computers aren't at a point where they can stand on their own. And the pictures I included here, the one in the background that's from IBM, you can see that quantum computer is incredibly intricate. And quantum computers are at a point where they need to work in tandem with classical computers. And they may always be that way. They really may never be able to fully stand on their own, and that's okay. They can still give us an incredible boost of computing power, which we desperately need, because as a global society, our problems are getting more complex. So in so many ways, quantum computing is maturing. The quantum computing industry is maturing at the perfect time because our problems are getting bigger, they're getting more complex. This is something that we really need. And then I included a picture of a woman at Rigetti, and she's holding up a piece of equipment that they're using at Rigetti. And it's a little bit difficult to see in this picture, but the environments for quantum computers are very particular. They have to be remarkably clean, they have to keep dust out, they have to be very sanitary, and they also have to be incredibly cold. So one of the things that we're doing at Boltz is we're really focusing on the software side, and we're working with hardware providers to try and figure out which one will be the best fit for us and who we can work with to give the best results for our customers. But at Boltz.ai, we're really focused on the software and we're not focused on the hardware. And that's something that you'll start to see as you get more involved with the quantum computing company, is that we're very partnered together, but there is a shift of, do you want to be on the software or do you want to be on the hardware? So we're on the software side. Then precision agriculture is this really interesting branch of agriculture that's come up where you can fine tune your farming operations by analyzing crops in really great detail. I was able to pull up a picture that I think is a nice example of what goes on in precision agriculture. So you can look at satellite data and you can use it to zoom in to the plant level and really see how your plant's health is doing. And then you can use that to help you make better decisions. So instead of looking at your entire field as a single unit and saying, okay, well, today I'm going to water my whole field, you could look at it and you can break it up. So we'll imagine you break it up into 4 different quadrants and you say, okay, so quadrant 1, it actually got enough water from a rainstorm that we had a couple days ago. I really don't need to water that one very much. But quadrant 2, that land is sloping. So I actually do need to go there and water it. And quadrants 3 and 4, they kind of need a middle ground amount of water. They don't need as much as quadrant 2, but they need more than quadrant 1. So you can go in and you can start to make better decisions. And with precision agriculture, that's where we start to get that piece of saving on resources. And that's where we can help farmers save money, which is really exciting. Yesterday, I was in a webinar on precision agriculture, and I was able to scoop this image from their presentation because I thought it was really good. It's a great example of looking at yields and how yields are influenced by different things. So the red images is where the yields go down, yellow it's where it's medium, and then the green is where the yields are doing really well. And you can see that they included notes in here. So in the red top right, they're saying it's a high salinity and it's poor drainage that's impacting our yields. On the bottom hand right corner, they fine-tuned it enough to say that there is road construction going on. And we saw that our yields were negatively impacted by that. And bottom right, it's completely the opposite. And they're saying, hey, this area is really good. The yields are great here. We have good soil, we have good drainage. So it's so fascinating about precision agriculture is that you can go into remarkable detail and you can really give your soil what it needs, and you can let that inform your decisions. And it lets us see more than we can with the naked eye. Because for me, at least, I look at a field and a field is a field. That's where it starts and that's where it stops. But with precision agriculture, you can go so much deeper than that.
Danika?
Yes.
There's a question that was asked, and maybe you'll touch on it later, but when you talk about precision agriculture, I thought this was kind of fitting. They talk about, you can help you manage operations and precision agriculture sort of on the farm. Have you thought about quantum computing? This question asks more about marketing of grain, maybe after the harvest, to maximize profits. So maybe it's along the lines of how can you, basically eke out the most amount with regards to the yield that you do produce.
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. It's something that so first of all, thank you so much for sharing that question. And thank you for the person who brought that up. That's something that we actually just heard about yesterday, I believe it was. I was doing another customer discovery call and I was talking to a gentleman who had grown up on a farm, and he was telling me about how he and his family have put the grain into the silo, and then every year there was some grain that they just couldn't get scooped out of the silo. And he said that it would have been really helpful for them if they could figure out a way to get all that grain out. And then like over the years, how much that would have added up for their family. So that's something that I think we'll definitely be looking more into, because I asked him to tell us more about that. We're gonna have a team call. We're gonna talk to him more. So while it's something that we haven't looked at right now, we are definitely in that customer discovery phase. So it's fantastic to get questions like that and people asking those really thoughtful questions, because there's things that we don't know. So while it's something that we hadn't thought about, I think it's a great area to look into. And we did have someone who brought up something similar just yesterday. So it's not something that we've looked into quite yet, but I think that you're really onto something, and I'm glad that you brought that up.
Cool.
All right. So for our product, Boltz.ai, we're doing a few things here. So we're able to combine precision agriculture, AI, and quantum computing. And what's really great about that is that there's a few benefits that we can bring our customers by combining those things. The first one is global and local guidance. So we can give very tailored advice by using satellite data to zoom in on things at the plant level. And we can figure out what's that plant's health, what's the soil data like, what's the weather like, and we can pull that all together and we can help farmers make better decisions. And then because we have the quantum computing piece, that also gives us a lot of scale. So we can scale out and we can look at operations on a very macro level. So if we're working with a global company, that could be a really nice boost where they can look at their information and be able to process it faster, and also know that they can zoom in and really get the most efficiency out of their operations. The next thing that we can do is we can give people speed. So we're working towards being able to deliver real-time updates so that our customers can get the latest information and that they can do what's best for their farm on that day. Because we know that there are things like rainstorms, wind speed, that have these outsized impacts on your operations. So we can help farmers take in all that information and give them the speed to be able to make decisions when they need to. And we can also give them flexibility. And we're looking at building custom solutions that can address each operation's unique challenges so we can meet the farmers where they're at. We can deliver value for them for what they're really paying attention to. And we've done a few proofs of concept. I can talk about a couple of them with you. So in partnership with the University of Sherbrooke, we've joined their IBM Q Hub. And what's really nice about this is that this is giving us access to IBM's quantum computers so that we can continue that experimentation of figuring out how do we take these really challenging, complex problems and make them friendly for a quantum computer. So we're very excited about this. We're excited to be partnering with the university, partnering with IBM, and moving that forward. Then another proof of concept that we've worked on is rock detection with potato harvesting. So this is an interesting phenomenon that I didn't know about until I joined Boltz, but with the potato harvest, with potato fields, there are rocks that are in the field, and over time, they'll get brought up to the surface, and that can cause some major issues during harvest time when farmers are trying to go through and get their crop out of the field, because the stones can get caught up in the blades, and then that causes a lot of downtime. It takes the resources and the labor to replace those blades, and then it's an expensive process to replace that damaged equipment. And when you're trying to get your crop out of the field, you may only have so many days to get it out of the ground. So if there's something that's slowing you down and really making it difficult, that could then impact how much money you end up making. Because if you can't get everything out of the field, you can't get the most money from it. So that's a major issue. And so to address that, we were able to run a piloted project to detect stones. We used ground penetrating radar, and we tested a novel quantum algorithm to help us find the stones. We're very proud to have a test farm. This is something that not every company can boast, but we can. So we know the growing season is really critical to our customers, and we're very proud to have our own test farm in London, Ontario. And this farm belongs to one of our team members, and it's managed by he and his family. And what's really nice about being able to have this facility is that we can run research and development on our farm so that our customers can test new ideas without having to worry about their production, without having to worry about their grow being interrupted. Because if you remember that earlier piece of guidance that I shared, where a farmer really only has 30 chances in his lifetime to make money, it's really critical that they get it right every time. So we can help them do that testing, iterate on it, figure out if they like it, and if they like it, they can take it to their farms and they can scale up. When I worked in the food industry for a global food production company, we had our own R&D facility, and it was like a mini manufacturing plant, and we are very proud of that. So it makes me proud that we can offer this test farm facility, and that's something that world-class global companies can offer. Now with Boltz.ai, we're at a really interesting point where we've been able to do these proofs of concept, and we've been able to show here's some of the capabilities we have, but we also know there's so much more that we could be doing. So we're doing a lot of customer discovery right now, where we're reaching out to our networking connections. We're starting to do that cold calling so that we can sit down with people and we can go to them and figure out what they want. Because with quantum computing, as I mentioned, you can tackle so many different problems. We have such a bright technical team. There's so much that we could do, but now we really need to figure out, okay, we can do all these different things, but as you, the customer, what are you really focused on? What do you really want to see? So some of the things that we're thinking about are job scheduling, nutrient detection, supply chain, and warehouse management. But we're really trying to put in the time to go out, listen to the customers, listen to their feedback, and then we'll help the market guide our next steps. Now, as a couple of side benefits to Boltz, we have the main one, so we can help people be adaptable, we can give them real-time updates, we can give them speed. There's a couple of other interesting benefits to Boltz that aren't immediately apparent. So there's a problem in food and ag, and I'm not sure how many of you are aware of this, but there is a major talent shortage, and we're really seeing this in the US right now. And here's why that matters. So if we don't have enough talent to go into the food and ag space, then that puts our food security at risk, that puts sustainable energy at risk, and that also harms environmental quality. And as we look at the generations, the baby boomers are starting to retire, we need people to replace the talent pipeline, but they're not there. The US and the USDA and Purdue did an interesting study where they looked at the amount of available jobs and they looked at the amount of talent that was already in the pipeline to fill it. And they found that about 40% of jobs are at risk of going unfilled, which is a pretty big deal. And these employment opportunities are really rich. They're very meaningful. So if you look at the employment opportunities on the right, we can see that it's in things like food and biomaterials, education, communication, management and business, and science and engineering. And farming is remarkably high tech. So what's kind of neat about being able to pull together quantum computing and AI and bring that into the ag space is that we're starting to attract talent. So we're really fortunate to have been able to have hired an MBA student from one of Canada's top universities. We're reaching out to several other universities to talk to them about hiring interns. Here in Minnesota, we've been talking with one of our potential customers to see if we could partner with them and if we could have an intern who could work on a project that they're really interested in so that we can help them explore how can quantum computing and AI add value for you while also nurturing their talent and really getting them to stay into the ag space. And we're also starting a conversation with a PhD student who's really interested in the cross of quantum computing and agriculture. So attracting talent, while it may not be a value add that immediately comes to mind, it's definitely something that's happening. It's a benefit that we're seeing of bringing these technologies into food and ag, and something that we want to keep focusing on because we want to help address the problems in the marketplace. Another thing that we're doing is we're investing in rural communities. In rural areas, if you've driven anywhere outside of the Twin Cities, you know it takes about 40 minutes to get out of the Twin Cities, and then your cell phone coverage just kind of starts going down, or at least that's how it is for me. So we are investing in 5G, and we're partnering with the Canadian government to run an experiment where we can run our product on their test bed and we can help benchmark 5G, we can help build out the capacity of that. And then we can also do the same thing in the US, because in the US government is starting to push for more 5G. They want to get their rural communities connected, because for communities that don't have the internet, it makes a really big impact on both their quality of life and their ability to do business. So it's another benefit of going into these farming communities, bringing the high-tech technology. We can partner with other people who are also really interested in high-tech technology, advanced technology, and we can help them invest in the rural communities and get them back online. Now for our customers, there's some customers that we've already been reaching out to and we're very excited about growing with them. So one of our current customers is Dalhousie University, and Dalhousie has introduced us to graduate students, and they would like us to teach them about the science that we're doing. So we're working with big data, cloud computing, hyperspectral imaging, image processing techniques, and open source software. And what's really exciting about this partnership is that we get to train the next generation of scientists, and we get to keep them interested in food and ag and get them thinking about those large problems that are coming up, like the food sustainability, environmental sustainability, and food security. So it's really a privilege to be able to work with the university. We're also doing a lot of connecting with local communities. We have team members up in Canada, and that's where we're incorporated. And since I'm here in Minnesota, we're able to start building out our US presence. So we've been reaching out to farming groups in both Minnesota and Mexico. So we're trying to really get a feel for where do we fit in this larger picture. And we're also reaching out to a quantum computing startup in South Africa. We would love to go farther south where there's more growing seasons and where we can do more iterations of the product. So we're very proud to be in Canada. I think that will always be our home, but we want to try and branch out because we know that this can have a value add on a global scale. So we're exploring that and going through that customer discovery process. And then for future opportunities, like one of our participants mentioned earlier, we can look at commodities. We can look at other areas that we haven't necessarily thought of yet. So one thing that I think could be really interesting would be to branch out into food manufacturing. And I have a background in food manufacturing where I spent a couple of years in that space, and it is remarkably complex. So when I was in food manufacturing, I started at the corporate level. I went through a training program. I spent time in supply chain, quality assurance, operations. Ultimately, I ended up liking operations the best because it was the only area that touched on every single thing. So when you're in operations, you're in the thick of it. And because I liked operations so much, I went and I worked in a plant as a production supervisor for a while. And it is just so complex. It makes it a lot of fun and it makes it really hard. So when I was in that space and we were working on getting product out the door every night, we had to think about, do we have the raw ingredients in? Um, if the raw ingredients are they in a part of the warehouse that's accessible? Sometimes you get into time crunches where a sudden change would be made and the product that you're planning on running tomorrow, all of a sudden you're running now. So you need to get people with forklifts pulling things out as fast as they can, getting them to the production line so that you can start working. You also have to think about allergens. If you're running 2 or 3 products in a night and say your first 2 have milk and peanuts, then you have to be mindful of what order are you going to run them in, because you have to almost stack your allergens and make sure that things are run in the right order. You also have to think about labor. How many people are you going to be having? How many people do you need to run your product for a given night? And then once you finally get your food produced, so you get all the raw materials together, you get your job scheduled in the right order, you have enough people to be able to pack it, how are you going to get out the door? So then you have to think about your freezer space. You have to think about when you've got a trucking company to come get it. And added to all of that, the weather and the outside environment can still have a big impact. I remember that when we got into the wintertime and those Midwest winters, I started hearing people talking about all the trucking delays that they knew were going to come up because there would be snowstorms in these rural areas where we didn't have the infrastructure, the capacity to be able to get the roads cleared in time. So food manufacturing is remarkably complex, and it's like the other side of the coin for agriculture. And I think that that could be just such an interesting area to go into. And specifically, there's an interesting story that came out for General Mills. They're one of the local companies here in the Twin Cities. They make a ton of different foods. So Nature Valley bars, the mug treats. I eat the mug treats a lot myself. Cheerios, and they make a bunch of different products. They've been here in the Twin Cities for decades. They're a very established community, established business that a lot of us know. And they did something really interesting. So when COVID-19 hit, General Mills was able to outrace the pandemic. They were able to start tracking where it was spreading, and they quickly caught on that people changed their buying habits very quickly when COVID hit. A lot of people started baking quite a bit more. There was a run on flour. There were flour shortages. They had to start running their operations around the clock to be able to meet that demand. There were a lot of people looking for comfort foods and cereal, whereas demand for that had been a little bit slow. All of a sudden it surged. So General Mills did a great job of being able to pivot and pivot really quickly and reroute their supply chains and make a lot of decisions that were able to keep them ahead of the curve. But what about the companies that couldn't do that? And I think that there's a really interesting area of opportunity here, and we can bring in quantum computing and AI in some pretty unique ways. So we already know that we can use quantum computing and AI to look at things like the job planning, the warehouse management. We could use it to look at logistics. But what if we used it to look at some things that are maybe more non-traditional data sources? I did a lot of research and I found out that the spread of the coronavirus could be tracked on both Twitter and Weibo. And Weibo is a Chinese platform. It's like the equivalent of Twitter. And there were a lot of studies about that that came out this year that showed that people started tweeting about their symptoms, or on Weibo, they started sharing messages and making updates about their symptoms. They would say things like dry cough, um, runny nose, body aches, difficulty breathing. And there was a link between where these Twitter updates were popping up and where the coronavirus was spreading. So in the US, we know that our response to COVID was disjointed at the beginning. It was difficult to get information. It was difficult to know where it was coming. I remember with the Minnesota Quantum Computing Meetup as a team, we were having an internal talk about this, and I was like, hey, we need to start thinking about COVID. And at the time, we weren't sure that it would even reach Minnesota. And about a week later, it did, and everything started shutting down. So for companies that want to go into non-traditional data sources and who really want to try and pull in as much information as they can to get ahead of the curve, stay competitive, quantum computing and AI could be really interesting because we could pull in Twitter data, we could pull in non-traditional data sources to be able to figure out not only where is your capacity, how do you need to run this, but also what does the consumer demand look like so that these companies can be very responsive to the marketplace. Now our competitors, these are some of the people that we're watching. This space is very crowded. We know that, and it's something that we have a lot of respect for. So there's a few companies in particular that we're paying attention to. So Climate Field View is one that will capture and analyze farmers' data in one location, and they'll help them analyze the yields. Yara is a fertilizer supplier that gives direct support on product use and data-driven advice on application rates and timing. And Next Farm uses satellite data to help crops grow more efficiently. So these three competitors are all doing very similar things. So we are just with a slightly different slant, and it's not limited to these three competitors. It truly feels like every day as a team, someone will send something and say, hey, here's this new logo that I noticed a company is doing something extremely similar to what we're doing. We really need to have them on a radar. We'll share an entire list of companies, or people will come to us and say, you should really be mindful that there's someone else who's already doing this. But what a lot of other companies don't have yet is they don't have that quantum computing piece. So that's where our differentiator comes in. And while we know that the quantum computing industry is still maturing, we're proud to be one of the forerunners in this. We're proud to be one of the pioneers who are working on making this happen, who are working on delivering solutions to the market because we feel that there's a need there. And now we're going through that customer discovery process. We're going through that rigor of reaching out to people and being able to provide value for them. So while this is an incredibly crowded, competitive space, we're relying on quantum computing to help give us that boost. And with that, thank you so much. So again, I would like to thank everyone who took the time to be on this call tonight. We really appreciate you being here. And if there's anybody who has feedback, if you'd like to get in touch, maybe you grew up on a farm, you think that there's something we can help you with, or if you just like to chat, I love to network with people. So please feel free to reach out to me directly, and you can do that at the email listed.
Excellent. Thank you, Danika, so much. I guess I just like to remind people to, if you have questions that you want to type in, side, please feel free to. There were some initial questions. Also, I guess if anybody has something that they would want to bring up, go ahead. I think you can unmute yourself, and feel free to ask it too. It doesn't need to be come through me. I guess I have an initial question to sort of kick it off. I mean, when we mentioned precision agriculture, when we mentioned supply chain management, a lot of the topics that you sort of like touched on with regards to areas in which quantum could be used, is it really the fact that we would be using this specialized piece of hardware, this specialized machine to really be able to pour over more data than what we could really do today? Is it kind of like AI on steroids, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. I think AI on steroids is a very fair way to describe it. We could be able to pull in a lot more data. So with the competitor slide, one of the things that we noticed when we were looking at our competitors was that they would look at soil data or they would look at weather data, but they wouldn't combine things together. So we think that with quantum computing, we can pair that with AI just to make it so much stronger and more powerful than it already is. And our world is just going to continue to get more interconnected, and farming is already such a high-tech space. So we know that they're going to have more data available to them, but one of the problems that they have right now is that it's very siloed. So we're going to try and pull that together.
What are the costs like? I mean, with IBM, you can actually is there a quantum as a service out there?
Yes, that's a great question. There absolutely is quantum as a service. So one of the advantages that we have as a startup is that we can provide cheaper solutions than a major company like IBM could. And I think that we could also give people more customized attention. So in terms of the pricing model, that's something that we're still we're still doing research on that. And we've gotten some feedback from customers about, here's what I'd be willing to pay, here's what you should really be targeting. So we're having the conversations to figure that out. And there are definitely bigger companies that could do the same thing. I think that where we could help people is that we could give them more customized one-on-one attention than a larger company could. And we can do it for less, money.
Fair enough. Sure, sure. As a smaller company, Renee here asked, yeah, as a startup company, what's your biggest challenge you guys face today?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Right now, I think one of our biggest challenges is figuring out what to chase. Especially for me, like just as a person, I love quantum. I love everything about it. I think it is so fascinating. So sometimes I get a little bit too caught up in, like think of all these different use cases. Here's all the different things we could be doing. So our biggest challenge right now is making sure that we go out and we talk to a lot of different people. And then within agriculture, there's so many different applications. We've talked to a group that represents a bunch of um, livestock growers and crop farmers, and so we could look at that, or we could go focus on California, or we could go focus on Mexico or South Africa. So that's almost our biggest challenge right now, is as we look at all these areas, we have to be very careful to not spread ourselves too thin, because just because the opportunity is there, that doesn't necessarily mean that we should be chasing it.
Totally, totally, yep. I think that's fair. I think a lot of startup companies have that conundrum, I guess, when you have a piece of technology, and if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, I guess, and so it could be applied in so many different areas.
Absolutely.
Sounds like you're still very much in the phase of getting customer input, kind of going through numbers of surveys and stuff like that with them, just to really laser focus on their pain points.
Yeah, yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think laser focus on the pain points is a great way to say it. We're fortunate to have a good network, so we've been able to reach out to people in our network, and now we're moving to the point where we're starting to do the cold calling and really ask people, like, okay, what do you want? If we could fix just like one or two problems for you, what would make your life that much easier? And we've been getting some really interesting conversation and guidance from that, of people bringing up problems that we had no idea were an issue. So we're absolutely in that stage of reach out, figure out what the people need, and try and deliver on that.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I know you mentioned Red Wing Ignite at the beginning. They're really into that, right? I mean, they really help companies form, evolve, and really go into a market. Right? Did this company come through that, or what's the relationship again between Red Wing
Yeah,
Ignite and Boltz?
absolutely. So the beginning of the year, there's a little bit of a story to this. At the beginning of the year, I got an idea for a separate startup. I was really chasing after that. I went through a Red Wing Ignite training just before COVID shut everything down. There was an existing connection there, and then when I was brought on board to work with Boltz, I committed to doing everything I could to help them grow their business development side, to build out their operations. And I said, I know this great group down in Minnesota. They've been so helpful to me. Do you mind if I reach out again? So I did, and because Red Wing Ignite is in an area that's really heavily focused on agriculture, and because I had that existing connection, it was a great fit. And they've really been champions and supporters of helping us realize what our strengths and our weaknesses are, and helping us grow, which we're extremely grateful for.
Cool. Do you have a launch date at all, or are you just kind of playing it by, and just kind of working on an iterative model, and you're not exactly sure when the iterations will end, and you guys will produce something that's public?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a launch date of Q3 of 2021. And to the person that asked that, if you have any interest in the Boltz.ai product, if you have any thoughts about stuff that we could solve for you, please feel free to reach out. We'd love to talk to you.
Awesome. This person asked, DeWitt asked, do you find older generation or more traditional farmers hesitant about the benefits of quantum computing? Are they easily embracing technology and open to innovation?
You know, that's a fantastic question. So far, we found people have been really open-minded to it. You know, it's kind of actually, let me walk that back a little bit. So it's been an interesting mix. We've gotten to talk to people who are already in the tech space, since a lot of the outreach we've been doing has been through networks. So it's my network personally. So we've been talking to people who are already, they already like technology. They're already really open to that. So a lot of the people we've been talking to so far have been very accepting of that. But what's kind of interesting is that we've also been getting some feedback that when we're able to talk to farmers directly, quantum computing may not make much of a difference to them. What's going to matter to them is delivering the results. So that's been something that we'll definitely need to keep in mind, is that when we do get to spend more time with people who are running their own farms, quantum computing may be a buzzword. It may not have very much meaning to them, but what would have meaning is helping them optimize their resource use or look at more data than they could before so that they can make better decisions. So far, everyone's been very receptive to it. But we have been given the coaching that we may hit a point where quantum computing gets less important and the value of being able to optimize resources will really become king.
Cool. Question from BJ here. Very excited about giving the insights in the agriculture sector. Have you seen, and maybe somebody from the quantum computing group could chime in too if you wanted, just you know, how is it evolving in other sectors like finance, science, medical, other applications that you're seeing?
Yeah, it's surging ahead. It's
Mm.
a really fascinating thing. So quantum computing is such an interesting space because even within the technology community, there's people who, for whatever reason, don't know about it. So it's even as I say it's surging, it's almost like if you know where to look, you can definitely see that there's a lot of people who are moving on it now, which I think is a very wise thing to be doing. JP Morgan, sorry, Morgan Stanley is doing a lot in this space. They've been releasing a lot of white papers about it. They're doing experiments in this space. There's some really interesting work being done with fraud in the fintech space. High frequency trading is another big area that's an early use case for quantum computing. So I have another role where I focus on fintech, which is why it's easy for me to speak to those because I pay particular attention to those use cases. But it's kind of a funny mix where if you're someone who's paying attention to quantum computing, it seems like almost every day there's some type of new breakthrough, new experiment, new use case that comes out. But if you're not paying as much attention to quantum computing, it's not making the big of a splash yet, but I think that it absolutely will do.
Good. Yeah, well said. If anybody has any other questions here? Okay. Well, once again, Danika, thank you so much for your time and all of this great information. We are excited to see where quantum goes in the future. We'll be posting this on this video up here in the next day or so on our AppliedAI our YouTube channel. Sorry, our YouTube channel. So we'll make sure that gets out and that gets posted on all the meeting notes for this. And also just a reminder to everybody, if you want to check out the next meetup, it'll be in December, the first Thursday in December. So that'll be the next time that we'll all get together. But thanks again for coming tonight, and Danika for the insights, and I look forward to seeing you around in the future for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.